Hello everyone, I am Snigdha Kakkar and this is my channel AccelerateAICareers. Today I have brought a very interesting LeetCode problem, LeetCode 169, majority element. Don't go by the easy tag here. It has a complexity added to this question because there is a follow-up question here, if you see. And the follow-up is, could you solve the problem in linear time complexity and in O1 space? So that's the complexity here with this question. If you don't have a follow-up, then it's an easy level problem. But if you have a follow-up, then it's a medium level complexity question. This question has been asked by several companies in last 0 to 3 months of their interviews. For example, Google, Amazon, Bloomberg, Microsoft, Accenture, and Meta are a few companies that have asked this question in their last few months of interviews. So this is quite critical. Now let's see what does this question say. So you have been given an array nums of size n, and you have to return the majority element as the name of the problem indicates. The majority element is defined as any element that appears more than n by 2 times in the array. That is, more than half of the array is comprising of that element. So it exists in majority. And you have to assume that the majority element will always exist in the array. It will not be a case that a majority element does not exist. So you will always have such examples where majority element does exist. In example 1, you have nums as 3, 2, 3, and your answer is majority element, which is 3. Now example 2 is 2, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2. So here your majority element is 2 because its frequency is 4, whereas the other number, which is 1, which is also frequently occurring, its frequency is 3. So since frequency of 2 is greater than frequency of 1, and 2 occurs more than n by 2 times more than the size, half of the size of the array, that's why the output is 2 here. Now let's see how do we solve this question. So the brute force approach to solve this question would be you go through the array and then you keep on updating the counts for each element that occurs. And as you keep on updating the counts, finally you return the value which has the majority count. Now you would ask me, which data structure should I use to solve this question? So as a brute force approach, when I don't have a follow-up, I would like to use a hash map here, because in hash map I can store these values, like say suppose I store 3 and its count, I store 2 and its count, and then whichever value has max count, I can fetch that and return that as an answer. So that's the brute force approach here. Now how do we solve it? So first of all, I will initialize my hash map here, then I will have my result and max count, two variables, both initialized at 0. Result wouldn't be nothing but the value from the array for which the count would be the max one, and max count is its count. So I have two variables, both initialized at 0 in the beginning. Then I will go through the array for n in nums, and I will keep on updating my count. So for count of n, I will add 1. And in Python, how do we do it? We will get the current count from the hash map if it has occurred before. If the value hasn't occurred before, the default count would be 0. So that's how you do it in Python. And then you will keep on updating your result only when the current count is greater than the max count. So result is equal to n, that is this value for which the count is greater than max count. So if count of n is greater than max count and result still remains result, you reset it to result. And you will also update your max count, and the max count would be max of current max count and count of n. And finally, there is nothing remaining to be done. You can return the result and you can run. It's accepted. Let's submit. As you can see, our solution is doing quite well here, but can we do better? To solve the follow-up here, we'll have to think of a different approach. Why? Because in this current approach, your space complexity is O of n because hash map occupies space. So you have to find a solution that also takes O1 of space complexity, that is constant space complexity. So what should be your approach? To solve this in O1 space complexity, I'm going to use an approach called Boyer-Moore algorithm. Now, how does this algorithm work? Let me give you the intuition behind this. Suppose this is the array given to you 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 1, 1. Now, as a brute force, you need to track the count of each variables, but earlier we were tracking the count in hash map. Let's track it in variables itself. So say suppose for 1, I track variable count 1, A1, and the count I add is 1. Then I track variable A2 count and I track the count as 1 again. And then I move ahead, the count for A2 changes to 2. And then I have variable A3 and I track the count as 1. Again A3 variable count as 2. And then A1 variable count increases and goes to 2. Again variable count increases, goes to 3. But for this, right, this array was small and you had less number of candidates. And thus you were able to track the count in variables, or you could have used 2 or 3 variables and track the count and then return the result. But this will not always be the case. You cannot have endless number of variables to track the count of each occurring element in the array. So to handle that, we will be using Boyer-Moore algorithm. Now, what does this algorithm say? Suppose I take this example 2, and I'll be using the intuition of tracking the count itself for the variable. Say suppose so I will initialize my result variable as well as my count by 0. Now, if my result is 0 and my count is 0, I go through the array. Now, as I come across a 2, since my count is 0, I will set my result equal to current value, which is 2. And I will increment my count by 1. Now, until I'm coming across only 2s, I will keep on incrementing count by 1. As soon as I come across some other value, I will decrement the count by 1. And as soon as my count becomes 0 again, I will set the result to n, whatever that n value is at that point of time. So let's solve this in this array through Boyer-Moore, and then you will be able to get what I'm saying. So first of all, my result and count both are initialized as 0. Now, since I come across the first value, which is 2, I set my result as 2. Since count is 0, I set my result as 2. And I update my count by 1. So my count becomes 1 and my result becomes 2. Now I go to the next value. My result becomes 2 again, same value. And my count gets incremented by 1. My count becomes 2. Now I go to the next value, which is not 2, which is not equal to your result now, which is 1. So you will keep your result as 2 for now, but you will decrement your count because right now the count is not for 2, it's for 1. So you will decrement your count by, you will go again to the next value, again you come across a 1. So you will again decrement your count by 1. And your count was initially 2 here and it got decremented twice, so your count becomes 0. As soon as your count becomes 0, you will reset your result to n now, and your n currently is 1. So now here your result becomes 1 and your count becomes 0. Now you go again to the next value, which is 1 again. So you increment your count by 1 because the value you have come across is result itself. So you get to count as 1 now. Now you come across the next value, which is 2. So it's not 1, which is not result. So you will decrement your count by 1. Your count becomes 0 again. Since count became 0, you will reset your result to this value, current value, which is 2. So your result will be 2. Your count is 0. Now you go to the next value. In next value, your result will be 2 and your count gets added by 1. So your count gets updated. And finally, you can return your result, which is 2. And that's the max value. It seems like a magic trick and you feel like if I use some other test case or if I have some other ordering of the values, this approach might not work. But you can test this method on any test case you have. It is a valid test case and it has a majority element occurring. This approach will work every time. You have to keep in mind only 2 things. One thing is you reset the result value only if your count becomes equal to 0. At that time, you set your result value to the current value, whatever the current value is. And you increment your count only when you are coming across that value, which is your result. And you decrement your count value when you come across some other value. These are the only 2 rules. So if you have understood the intuition behind this question, let's start coding it. First of all, I will initialize my result and my count both as 0, 0. I will not take max count here because I'm updating my count every time I navigate through the array. So I will go for n in nums. Since I'm going through the array in both the approaches, both hash map and this approach, time complexity would still be O of n. But space complexity would be O of 1 here since I'm not using any additional data structure. Now I go through the array for n in nums and I check if my count is equal to 0. So first condition was if your count is 0, you reset your result to n, whatever your current value is. That's what I'm doing here. Also, you will increment your count by 1 if your n is equal to your result, else you will decrement it by -1 if it is not equal to your result. And finally, you can return your result. So this was a simple code. Nothing else is needed. Just run it. It's accepted. Let's submit. As you can see, our solution is beating 100% of all the solutions available on LeetCode here. So we have done it quite well. Our memory complexity or space complexity would be constant O of 1 as desired in the follow-up question. And our time complexity here would be O of n since we are looping through the entire. The intuition behind the question is you increment the count by 1 only if your current value n is equal to your result which you have set, else you will decrement it by 1. As soon as your count gets equal to 0, you update your result to the current value n. That's the intuition behind this question. If you have any doubts, ask them in the comments here. I'll be happy to address it. If you like my way of solving problems, subscribe to my channel to get your notifications for your daily LeetCode challenge. Thank you.